So writer Chris Chibnall was recently announced as Stephen Moffat's replacement for the showrunner of Doctor Who. The fans have, predictably, already bisected themselves right down the middle between those who are accepting of the change and those who are vehemently against it. Putting aside that Moffat is still in charge of Series 10, and that series won't be coming until 2017, meaning we've got well over 2 years before the reins are firmly in his grasp, I definitely count myself as one of his supporters. However, unlike most of that camp, I've yet to watch any of Broadchurch, the series that Chibnall is currently heading, so I'm gonna have to put some work into justifying why I think he's a good choice for this show based solely on his Doctor Who stuff. What this means is one video per Chibnall Doctor Who story extolling what I find to be the virtues and positives of each one. There's always a chance that what works about these episodes will overlap, and this might get a tad repetitive, but I'll try my best to avoid that because honestly, any excuse to make multiple videos about this show on my channel is a blessing. Especially since events have conspired, so I can't really talk about Series 9 as soon as I'd like to. Obviously, starting with this first story for the show, we have 42. Speaking of what I find personally to be underrated, I feel Doctor Who Series 3 deserves a bit more recognition than it gets. Outside of a really weak finale and whatever the heck this was, this stretch of episodes has a lot going for it. It begins with what I think is a perfect example of a jumping on point for the series. Martha Jones is a great companion, and it really solidified the sometimes morbid but often swashbuckling tone of the modern series far better than either of its predecessors did. 42 is a great example of this tone as it follows the 10th Doctor and Martha as they get stuck on a mining ship that's taken energy from a living sun that's thoroughly pissed off and slowly murdering the crew as they drift closer and closer to it. Oh wait, is that a spoiler? Sorry, spoilers in these videos. First note in this episode's favor is how quick it is to get to the point. We get a quick scene establishing Martha's ability to call home for later in the episode while simultaneously using that as a means to display where she and the Doctor are at right now relationship-wise.
Frequent flyers privilege.
Then we get a distress signal, pop out of the TARDIS, and establish two things. One, that it's hot as balls. And two, the reason it's hot as balls is because we're on a ship that's about to crash headfirst into a giant sun. Now, crashing into the sun is already the type of thing that would, kill you. Duh. But because we've established the heat as an affecting factor, we know that it's probably going to cause these characters a lot of strain long before that even happens in 42 minutes. It's an element beyond anyone's control that helps add to the tension. Also, and I have no idea if this was Chibnall's idea or the director's, but it's a pretty smart move to have a giant panning shot from the Doctor and Martha to the outside of the ship, establishing how massive it is relative to a person, so there's even more tension when characters have to beat the clock from one end to the other in a few scenes' time. Good. Great. Solid opening that tells us where our main character's relationship is, where we are, what conflict we're facing, who we're facing it with, and how long we have to fix a problem in just a little over 2 minutes. It's noteworthy because more often than not, Doctor Who follows a pseudo-mystery format, with the main characters and the audience in the dark as to what exactly we're dealing with and why until we're a good ways into the episode. This is obviously still the case considering there's more to learn about this situation, but this opening is still a nice way to get the Doctor and Martha into a proactive position without wasting any time but still feeling natural. We then get scenes that are mostly just fun, as the Doctor does his doctorly thing of inserting himself seamlessly into a precarious situation, proving how, if nothing else, Chibnall knows how to write this character, particularly this incarnation. There have been 13 different actors to play this character by now, and though all of them play the role distinctly, there's enough common elements that some scripts could believably be delivered by all of them. 42 is a strange animal in that it's at the same time one of those scripts and yet feels tailor-made for David Tennant. I mentioned earlier that this season is where a lot of things started to solidify, and foremost among these was Dr. Ten. His characterization was a bit weird in Series 2, but by now he's firmly embodied the role of a technical genius so naturally empathetic, funny, and charming that even complete strangers don't question it when he starts ordering them around. And yet another example of this story using its time very economically. And whoa! Sorry, distracted by the teeth. Anyway, the next big character beat is for Captain Kath, who has to cope with having her husband first be infected, then a murderer, then dead in quick succession. Michelle Collins delivers a sense of stress, anguish, and disbelief while as things get worse and worse, and as the Doctor questions her, we get the sense from her performance alone that she knows more than she's saying. Then the infection that's driving said husband crazy spreads, and events conspire so Martha and one of the crew members, Riley, get stuck in an escape pod together and are forcibly launched away from the ship, leading to some scenes that are pretty harsh on the feelings. First, we get the Doctor telling Martha he'll save her, only for us to hear the complete silence from Martha's perspective as the Doctor gets more raw and helpless, desperate to do something to somehow comfort her. Then we get a bit of backstory regarding Riley's background, and while on the face of it it's just an excuse to have a quiet drama scene in the midst of all the chaos, I actually like the setup it gives for what happens next. Martha makes it clear that she believes in the Doctor, and when Riley mentions not having anyone like that in his own life, Martha is quick to bring up family. We've seen how botched Martha's family life is in earlier episodes, and the thought that she could die there and then without them even knowing what happened to her or how much she loved them, flaws and all, spurs her to call her mother. We see during the call that her mother is being monitored, and before we even know who's observing her or why, we get a sense of trust being betrayed, made all the worse by dramatic irony. Martha doesn't know she's being used or spied on in this moment, but as her mother continues to bring up the doctor, it's almost like Martha just gives up hope. As far as she can tell, her mother is just being controlling and untrusting of her, which is probably worse than being mined for information given that she's trying to have a tender moment. She gives up the call and there's a sense of defeat for her. She's going to die, and the attempt to at least die in the knowledge that she and her family can express some love to each other without barriers is, as far as she knows, flat rejected. Of course, after such a cynical moment, we need things to start going right again. So back on the ship, we get the payoff to the Doctor's constant chastising of the pessimistic engineer Scannell. The Doctor is trying to bring Martha and Riley back to the ship, and just as it seems like the Doctor is giving up, Scannell provides the faith necessary to spur the Doctor on, the first ounce of idealism he's shown in the whole episode.
I don't know how much longer I can last! Come on, don't give up now!
It works, and fittingly, the moment things take a slight turn for the better is when the Doctor realizes the son is alive and gets possessed by it himself. Now this is mostly down to David Tennant's acting chop, but credit to Chris Chibnall for engineering a situation where the Doctor is in such complete agony. It's such a rarity to see this character in such complete physical pain. We're talking Pyramids of Mars or Heaven Sent level stuff here. The whole sequence of getting the son out of him is incredibly tense, not just for the Doctor, but for Martha as she watches him slowly die, and Kath as she's faced with the consequences of her decision to mine the sun for fuel. It's plain stressful and goes a long way to making the episode feel even more like a gauntlet for everyone involved.
I'm scared. I'm so scared.
We also get the reincorporation of belief, as you do. The Doctor's been extolling a sense of optimism throughout the whole episode, believing in himself that things will turn out okay. Now that he's genuinely terrified for his own life, the time has come for him to believe in Martha, who's just witnessed firsthand how right he is. It's a great little moment that really ties the theme of the episode together. Of course, something goes wrong, and with a single line,
Give it to me.
Kath makes it clear she plans on taking responsibility for what she's done. She rushes to fix a problem and in the process runs right into her husband. In a split-second choice, she decides to get off the sidelines and make the hero's sacrifice, paying for mistakes and buying time for Martha to save the rest of the ship. And so the episode ends with most of the crew dead. Those remaining, however, the Doctor and Martha included, all in the story with a renewed sense of belief. Scannell gets his cynicism proven wrong, Riley has a new role model in Martha, the Doctor has more faith in Martha than ever before, and Martha gets another chance to bridge things up with her family. I will say, one mark against this episode is the kiss between Riley and Martha. It was unnecessary, and their relationship was better off without any romantic implications. It's offset, though, by another brilliant moment right afterward, where the Doctor is still and unresponsive for a moment as if his brain is a computer that needs to reboot itself after the trauma he just suffered. I really didn't plan on making this one of those plot summary type reviews, but I think the fact that it came out that way speaks to how much good is in this episode. It's not perfect. If I didn't mention any side characters by name in this review, it's because they didn't leave much of an impression, and I can understand some people disliking Kath's character even though I personally didn't. Then there's a complaint that this is a rehash from the Satan two-parter of the previous season, and while I won't argue that there are definitely some derivative ideas, I prefer an unoriginal idea executed well to an original idea executed poorly, and 42 was definitely executed well. It's just a really solid bit of character-driven sci-fi with a neat premise, a well-executed theme, and both of our main characters at tip-top form. To ask much more of it already feels a bit mean.